Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Transportation Talks. Today I'm here with Joe Stainsby with OmniRide with Prince William County. I'm really excited to finally have you on the podcast.
Happy to be here.
I've been waiting for so long. I kind of ask this question a lot to guests. What got you into transportation? Like, what got you here today? Like, what's your
Okay.
like, tell us about your background a little bit.
So the story of me.
Yeah.
So I do not have a transportation background. I didn't go to school to be an urban planner. I went to school to study sociology and anthropology. So I did some work in that field, and I moved to the United States in 2003 because my girlfriend, now wife, she lived in the States, and we needed to fix that living situation. So when I first moved here, I was looking for a job that makes a difference. And that, if it is a guiding light for me, it's something that is impactful to people's lives. So I worked for an organization called People for the American Way when I first moved here, which is a civil rights organization. They do get out the vote stuff.
Right.
I worked for them for a couple of years. They went through a funding crisis and they downsized. And then I got, so I went to a temporary temp services and a place called VPSI, which stands for Vanpool Services Incorporated, which was at the time the nation's largest vanpool company, subsequently got bought out by Enterprise. They were looking for a receptionist, and so I needed to eat, so I took that job, and then I was off and running. So I did the vanpool thing there, from basically receptionist to Mid-Atlantic area manager. I was there for 6-7 years. And then right before the birth of my second son, he's my only son, but my second child, we were really looking to get out of the private sector, right? And I wanted to try and do something with vanpooling because at that point, that's what I was qualified in, right? And I was like, okay, so what's going on? And so I'd gotten word from PRTC, OmniRide, where I work now, because I worked with TDM folks in the region just as a matter of course. And so I'd gotten word that they were looking at setting up a vanpool incentive program. And that program became Vanpool Alliance. It didn't have a name at the time that I was hired. I was basically hired right at the end of 2012. And then I worked on my own with the help of Chuck Steigerwald, who was the director of strategic planning at the time, to set up that program, and it became Vanpool Alliance. One of the things we did was to pick the name, and that's federal NTD program that reports transit database information and also provides a stipend to the people that participate in the program. Right. It's had anywhere from 300 to about 600 vans in it. COVID did it no favors, and much like everything else in transit.
Exactly.
And currently it has about 400 vans in it, right? So our executive director, Bob Schneider, when he was hired on in 2017, 2018, he came in and created a position of the Chief Development Officer, which is someone who oversees our planning department, the TDM department, which came to be called Mobility Services, and then also our planning department. Now, our planning department, which overdoes all of our service planning, they also have, as a very large part of them, our customer service department. The people who answer the phones, all this, that, and the other. So that position was created, and Chuck Steigerwald was in that position for a hot minute because he was basically on the cusp of retirement when the position was created, right? So he was in that position, and I think he was in it for such a short period of time that I think a lot of people think that the only person who ever had that job is me, but that's not true. So he left and retired, and he was a mentor of mine. And then in August of 2020. I interviewed for and got the position, and so I've had the position now for 5.5 years. So I took it basically right in the depths of COVID.
I was going to mention that.
Right.
How was that like?
It was, in a way, it was like the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? Because you're coming into it, it's completely bonkers. Your ridership has evaporated. You're trying to prop up van pools, doing supplementary payments, working with DRPT. You're trying to figure out what level of bus service we should run.
Did it feel like a fresh start in a weird way?
It did, and that was actually the really great thing about it, because there was definitely some imposter syndrome things I think that we all have. But I think I was helped out by the fact that even if you were the most experienced, most qualified candidate coming into that position, you're like, welcome to the blender, right? So, so really, your ability to think on your own, independently, to be good at operations and doing things was critically important in that job. And I think that if I've built a reputation for anything over the years, it's doing things. They're not necessarily always going to be the right things, but you just try to put that on a shelf, not make that particular mistake again, and just kind of go forwards. Yeah. So I think it was actually a good time to come in. And, I guess at least on some level it's been going reasonably well because I'm still there. So there we are. That's the story of me.
Well, you touched on this for a second too, but like, I guess how has your experience, your education, I guess, with anthropology and sociology impacted like the work you've done with OmniRide?
I've always been interested in people and why people do what they do, right? And as I said at the beginning, also doing things that make a difference, right? And so it's money. Everyone has to have money. You have to have money to get by, to have a roof over your head, but it is not the be-all and end-all, right? I think a big part of being in transit, the one commonality that everybody has is that they aren't there for the money. There's always always somewhere they could go different that they would make more money than they currently do, right? But everyone's there to make a difference. You're getting people to and from work at the Pentagon, you're doing this, that, and the other. That's great, but those are choice riders, right? I like those people. That's how we butter our bread. That's wonderful. But the real core of our service, our microtransit and our fixed route bus service, those are the people who you're taking, the frontline workers during COVID, the people who work at the grocery store, the people who work at McDonald's, the people who are transit dependent, right? They're the people whose lives you change and enable on a daily basis. And so that's been fascinating for me to help those people. And, van pooling is interesting in that it always amazed me that people would happily pay several $100s a month to drive from point A to point B, but they would only see the value of a van pool as long as it was free. If that van pool cost them $5 or $10 or $20, it wasn't worth it. So I'm going to drive. And you're like, yeah, but that's still like $300 a month less than driving. I don't care. It's not worth. So people often do not behave rationally. They do not do things that are in their own best interest. And as a sociologist, I find that tremendously interesting.
Like the behavioral economic aspect of it, right?
And so now I oversee, one of my responsibilities is also our marketing department, right? So it's how do we get people onto our services? How do we promote our monthly pass? How do we talk about the services that we do? How do we interline our services, that being where our buses from one bus meets up with another bus and you get on it at that point in time and, you don't have to wait. Well, that's great as long as the traffic's all working. Like, how well does that work? How long are people prepared to wait? How can you push the envelope from a fare perspective whilst also being fair? No pun intended, right? All of those types of things are things that you deal with on a daily basis that are fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I had similar background. I started in anthropology, cultural anthropology.
I didn't actually know that.
No. So I went to George Mason.
Okay.
For graduate school for anthropology, but we were talking a little bit before this, but a lot of my thesis work was on public participation. Like, what gets people to want to participate, in government and learn more about what's going on locally, and more specifically what they can do to make a difference. And then it was the same kind of pathway, I guess, for me as well, where it was like, why do people do what they do, and how do you get them like the information they need to make more decisions on their personal
100%.
And in this, like the TDM, the transportation domain management realm, with multimodal transit, seemed like a good avenue.
It definitely is. I mean, I think like everybody in my family is a civil servant of some level. Lots of teachers and other things besides. And it was always been instilled in me to two things: to get an education and to do stuff that makes other people's lives better. Awesome. I almost didn't go to university because I thought it was bloody boring, and there was nothing that I thought was particularly interesting. Right, but I looked at anthropology, and specifically the anthropology that I studied was very much a classical khaki shorts in desert, in like old school Margaret Mead type Bronislaw Malinowski type
right.
anthropology. That's what I studied. The sociology aspect of things, it was much more modern and much more relevant. I think the khaki short type anthropology would only have been useful to me in an academic environment if I pursued it to a doctoral level, which I did not. But it is interesting in the sense that it shows you why people do what they do. I found that fascinating, so off to university we went.
It felt like that. It was like the anthropology was the most. It felt at the time the most the most scientific of the liberal arts, but then like the most liberal of the scientific arts.
Yeah.
It was like kind of going that line. But then when I took one sociology class I did, I was like, oh, maybe I should have done. It felt more analytical, I guess. It was
well,
like
it's
more
interesting in the UK. If you do sociology and you do anthropology, in some places, if you do it at a bachelor's level, you'll get a Bachelor of Arts. And in some places, you'll get a Bachelor of Science. And it depends on the course load. So it literally does chart that line.
I feel like it's just right on the line there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a Bachelor of Science, in case anyone's interested. So there we are.
Awesome. So, kind of going back to OmniRide and stuff, like what's an average day look like for Joe?
An average day would typically be I get into the office at 7. I'm an early person. I've had a paper route since the age of 13, and so I'm always up early. And this is, I'll give you away one of my little secrets here. I think that the best way that you can, I like to seem informed and on top of things, right? And the biggest cheat code that you can do for that is I start my work before most other people do, right? Which doesn't make you any better. It just means that you've read all the emails. You're up to speed on everything.
You're not
that's
still
happened.
waking up.
And so when they arrive, you can be the obnoxiously informed person at 9 a.m. because you've already been there for 2 hours. So I would come in. At 7, emails, all of that good stuff, and then I'd maybe meet with our planning department on proposed changes for our next service change. We typically do 2 or 3 of them a year. We just did one a couple of weeks ago. And generally that's going to be adding new commuter routes, changing the timings, changing the routings, this, that, and the other. And they put that stuff together, they bring it to me, see if it passes the sniff test, and then we kind of roll it up to change. So that would be a typical thing. Then maybe meeting with the marketing department to go over some of the collateral for a senior summit event we just did our Transit and Treats event, which is a major community outreach in the Woodbridge Dumfries area, where we spend a whole day handing out candy in front of buses at various grocery stores in the area, looking at the marketing material for that. Then maybe in the afternoon, because I'm one of those C-suite people, we do a lot of budget discussions, and we are perpetually tin cupping, right? That's what we do. In Prince William County, we are funded almost exclusively through the gas tax, right? Which, as our executive director likes to point out, is an unusual mechanism to fund us, because you get money from the gas tax when people put gas in their cars, and we exist to take people out of their cars, right? So
you exist to defund yourself.
Exactly. We exist to defund ourselves. So that's a challenge. So in the last few years, we have been topped up by the temporary occupancy tax, which is a hotel tax, and then the grantor's tax, which is what you pay when you're buying a mortgage or anything in the county. We get money from that, but that's not codified. Right? So every year we start from a place where we're in the hole, and so right about this time right now, November, we are working through the budget and this, that. And in fact, right after this, I'm going to Manassas to go and sit in a budget meeting. So that would be a fairly typical day. I try to spend some time every day with each one of the departments that I oversee, because with the majority of what we do being our bus service, it's very easy to spend a lot of time with planning, right? I have to be conscious of spending time with the Vanpool program, which is part of our mobility services team, and our marketing program, because otherwise the planning just sucks up all of your time, because there is no limit to the amount of time that you can spend doing that. It's just infinite. So there we go.
No, that's great. Can you kind of touch on too? So I mean, I think I had someone on earlier last year with Loudoun County's transit and stuff. We kind of talked about just the interconnectivity across regions, because there's like just so many people who might live in Fairfax County but might be commuting outside, or people that live in Prince William County commuting.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Like how the connectivity, and we've seen that developing over the years. You know?
Absolutely. I mean, we try to do the best that we can with that. I mean, just on like a very simple level. I mean, our furthest north on 95 commuter lot is Horner Road, right? Which is basically about 2 miles south of Lawton, right? Lawton being in Fairfax County. Yeah. We have a lot of people that drive south to go north.
Yeah, you mentioned that, yeah.
We have a lot of people that do that. Our biggest core of our service is the Pentagon. We run most of our service north, south, and east, west into the Pentagon, right? And that's not just because we have a crap load of people who work for the DoD who work at the Pentagon.
I was going to say a lot of people go there and then...
Exactly. It's a hub for the blue line and yellow line specifically. Yeah. And so we bring people into that hub as best we can. Over the last few years, as the state has stepped up its express lane programs on 66 and the FredEx extension lanes, we now run service from the Commonwealth lot, which is way down in Spotsylvania County, and also from the Crooked Run Park and Ride lot, which is in Front Royal. Right?
Oh, you do.
So yeah,
is that newer?
No, it's new. Yes, we've done it for about 9 months now.
Okay,
right?
I thought that was new.
And so it picks up there, and then it comes down into University, which is right off 66, and then it goes into the Pentagon, and also going into the University Park and Ride lot. We have one that picks up in Culpeper, right? So we do have stuff that runs from all over the place. In fact, speaking of, you mentioned Loudoun County. Loudoun County just started, I think, 2 weeks ago, a bus route that goes from our neck of the woods, from Dale City, all the way over to the airport and then down into Leesburg, right? Okay. So really what this area has seen, I think, over the last few years is a big increase in bidirectional commutes. Right? So it's no longer this monolithic block of north in the morning, south in the afternoon, east in the morning, west in the afternoon. It's not that. And I think Fairfax Board of Supervisors Chair McKay, I think, routinely says that the biggest disservice that this region ever did to itself was to make those 95 lanes one direction. Right? There is a plan afoot, I believe, to make them bidirectional, and that would help tremendously because I live in Alexandria, I work in Woodbridge, right? So I am going south in the mornings and north in the evenings, and there's a lot of people that do that. 66, it's even more, and fortunately, those express lanes allow that, right? So it's really trying to build your service so we now have more peak service. A lot of our commuter service just kind of goes in the morning and then deadheads back to the yard, right? And then we theoretically wouldn't start up again till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We've changed that. COVID forced everyone to think outside the box, and then folks were only going in a couple days a week, or they might be going in at noon or something like that. Do you have service at noon? You don't? Okay, well, I guess I'm not taking the bus. Well, now we have service at noon, right? So
those planning meetings, right?
Right. We've taken those morning AM and PM peaks and just pressed on them, so it spreads it out more throughout the day, because people are looking for flexibility, right? And in the past, we didn't really offer that so much, but now we've really been able to pivot to offer that.
And it's like, I guess, I don't know how much of an impact COVID really had on that, because I assume quite a bit, because I mean, a lot of people are moving to physically buy new houses and stuff and changing where they lived.
Yeah, 100%. I think that basically, I think mostly people just moved out. Right? Because they either weren't going in or they were going in less. And they're like, I can suck it up for a 2-day-a-week commute and live somewhere where I can afford a 4,000 square foot house versus a 1,000 square foot.
It's like half the price of this house, but double the size.
Yeah, exactly here, that, right? And so we have that. I mean, we have a lot of people who used to get on at Horner Road who now get on at Commonwealth, right? Which is like 30 miles further south. Right? So that kind of stuff you see a lot.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about like the buses and stuff, but kind of going back to Vanpool, I guess. I guess since you've been there, what are some of the challenges I guess you've seen? And you touched on some of them too, with like, people like with the money and wanting to not spend as much on a Vanpool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people, that's the biggest, the most vexing point is that people only see the value if it's free. And for those folks who don't know, the vast majority of people who take Vanpools in the area are federal government workers, and they have access to the federal transit benefit, right? So, which I believe currently is 330, something like that. And that almost always covers the cost of your VRE or your OmniRide or your van pool. And so people are prepared to spend it as long as it's quote unquote free. But as soon as it's more than that, then they don't want to do that. And what you've seen in van pooling, I sound so old. When I first started with van pooling, basically the only vehicle you had was a 15-passenger van, and that's what everybody had. Because the federal transit subsidy was two things. It either didn't exist or it was $120. And if you wanted to ride, quote unquote, for free, you needed to shove as many people in that van as humanly possible,
get your money,
right?
yeah.
There was a big change in 2009, 8-9, where it went from 120 to 230 overnight, right? And the whole framework for van pooling changed then. And so what you have now is you have people who just want minivans.
I was going to say, is that when you saw the change?
Yeah,
more to
it's
more
when you
like
saw it.
Just
It
regular mini.
was literally overnight, because suddenly they didn't need 15 people to be commuting for free, right? They could get 5 people into a minivan, and minivans are great because they're easier to drive. The HOA doesn't complain about them because with the big vans, they were commercial vans, and a lot of people's HOAs didn't allow commercial vans in their park and ride lots, in their parking lots.
That's a good point. So growing up as a kid, my dad had always worked in D.C., and he was in a van pool, and so he'd have one of those big 15-passenger vans, but he sometimes it'd be parked in front of our house. A lot of times he'd park it over in front of the Martins or Giant, right? And then they'd meet there to take it in. But I remember him always being like, oh, we lost one person, we got to find... It always seemed like it was trying to find people to fill seats.
Yeah.
And then when I started taking a van pool, this is like pre-COVID, at a Front Royal area, it was just, like a small... minivan at that point.
It's because
like
the finances have changed.
Right.
The barrier to entry is less. I mean, fortunately, programs like Van Pool Alliance exist where you can get $300 a month for reporting your ridership. So generally speaking, let's say you've got 4 people and you're all getting, let's say $300 a month, just to be easy about it. Right. $300 a month. You're also getting $300 a month from Van Pool Alliance, right? It doesn't take very long until you're talking $1,500, $1,800 in benefit, which generally will cover your cost, right? So the program has done quite well. I mean, it's still not back to the full height that it was right before the peak of COVID, let's say February 2020, right? Where it was maybe at about 600 vans.
6, 7. So yeah, and you're back to, like you said, what, 4?
I think we're about 400 or so, right?
What was like the lowest, I guess?
The lowest, well, other than when we started with 200, the lowest we ever went down to was about 200 and change.
Okay, wow. So I mean, it went back. Good.
It did. It very much did. I mean, and then the program is the largest program of its kind east of the Mississippi, right? And that's kind of a soft thing to say because all of the big programs for van pools are all on the left coast, right? And the main reason for that is all of those states are generally much more environmentally proactive than East Coast states, and they all have trip cap mandates. Right? And so, meaning that every organization over X size, 100 people, has to have X amount of people that travel there not on their own. And if you're someone like, to give a good example, Microsoft in Redmond, Washington, right? They have hundreds of van pools because they're in a suburban campus, but they still have the trip cap mandates. So they are required by law to have X percentage of people get there not driving on their own. And van pools are great for that, which is why the nation's largest van pool program is King County, Washington, right? And they've got about 1,500 vans.
Oh, wow.
But the rest in that, the other big ones are all California, Orange County, LA. They're all, but east of the Mississippi, the biggest is us.
Right, so Boston and New York probably like kind of...
New York, kind of nothing really.
Yeah.
Boston, big program, right? Not as big as us, right? Richmond has a decent program, an older program than us, but smaller, right? There's also Hampton Roads has a program. Lynx runs a program in Florida, which is the Space Coast. Tallahassee has a program. So there are plenty of programs on the East Coast. They're just not as big as Van Pool Alliance, and most of that's because of the federal government, quite frankly. You know, like when Van Pool Alliance came into existence in October of 2013, right, was its first month opening, there were already 300 or so vans in Virginia, because bear in mind, there's more vans than are in Van Pool Alliance. We can't take vans from Maryland, right?
Right.
So there are couple hundred vans, probably more than that in Maryland, right? We do have vans at places like the NSA or the White Oak campus of National Institutes of Health, all of those, but only if they start in Virginia. If you're doing Maryland to Maryland, like a very common commute would be, let's say, Frederick or Hagerstown down to like the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, right? They're not in our program at all. They can be in COG's program, the Pool Rewards program, right? Pool Rewards, I believe, still is just the one vendor that they work with, that being Enterprise. Van Pool Alliance has nearly 40 vendors.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Oh, I didn't realize that many.
So, of which Enterprise is one.
One of them,
Enterprise is the biggest one, right? But we have several other vendors that are 40 vans, 50 vans.
Oh, okay.
And then we have maybe 20 van pool companies that are like one van.
Right.
2 vans, right? So it really does run the whole gamut.
It's interesting that just the geography of it, like thinking about the state of Washington versus like not being able to include Maryland. I mean, just having all these states so close together here around the hub of DC, where they don't have that issue.
No, well, I mean, I think that applies more broadly even to just transit, right? I mean, you have so many. I mean, just to rattle them off, just north of OmniRide, you've got Fairfax Connector, right? You've got Q, you've got Dash, you've got Metrobus in there somewhere, all over the place. Then you've got FXB Go south of us. Then you've got, what do they still call it, the bus in Prince George's County? Then you've got all these other ones run by MTA. So it's really is there's a lot going on here. A lot of different hands in the pot.
Yeah, I think that's what's kind of unique about this region too, is just the interconnectivity of everything and how we've
for sure
grown over the years.
And I think generally speaking, everybody plays nicely in everybody's sandbox, because everyone understands that it's like you can't have clear defining lines. Okay, well, you don't come in here because you're not going to serve any of the people here. And it's like, yeah, well, you almost certainly do have people that would use this. So everyone, I think, has developed this understanding that you just kind of play nice with each other and try to integrate in as many places as you possibly can.
And it's like a lot of us kind of have like these dual like teams where or it's like we work here in this county or whatever, so we care about it, but we might live in a different county, so it's not like we see the lines as definitive. It's like
I live in Fairfax County. I work in Prince William County.
It's like, but we see this whole region as like our home kind of.
Absolutely.
So I think
absolutely.
That's kind of the cool
go along
to
get along.
Right. Have you seen, I guess, microtransit kind of developing too over the years?
So microtransit is a big thing for us. We currently have 2 microtransit zones, one over in Manassas Park area, and then one down in Dumfries, which is kind of south on 95, and also serves a little bit of the town of Quantico, right? Which is, I always feel sorry for the people who live in Quantico, because it is just a regular bog standard town that happens to be inside a Marine Corps base, right? Which makes serving them with regular transit almost impossible, right? So we have had those zones, the western zone, for a bit longer than our eastern zone. I think maybe coming up on 2.5, 3 years, and 2 years for the eastern zone. We operate them pretty much exclusively with EVs. Those are the only EVs that we have in our fleet. We don't have any buses or anything like that. It's all small vehicles, because we thought that was what was most appropriate. But that model, the demand response model, the fundamental excitement that transit agencies have about it is exactly that, the demand response. If the trip is not asked for, the trip doesn't happen, right? And so particularly on the western side, we used to have a route called the Manassas Park Route 68, which drew a lot of criticism from the public and also from some electeds. It was always driving around empty. Right, and it wasn't driving around empty, but it just wasn't driving around full, right? And so what you can do with microtransit is you can kind of right size the fleet, right? And you move them into smaller vehicles. The trips don't happen unless they need to happen. You can cover a larger service area. You can get into neighborhoods better than you can do with any bus. And so those zones have both been phenomenally successful, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't also mention, like from my perspective, from the CDO perspective, the biggest existential problem that we have for bus transit in this country is that people don't want to be bus drivers anymore, right? And COVID really did to that, because it was a frontline job. People didn't want to get COVID. They don't want to get punched and spat at, and you do see there has been increases in that level of antagonism and violence towards bus operators, and so people are selecting themselves out of that pool, right? And that's important for microtransit, because in microtransit vehicle you do not have to have a commercial driver's license, right? Yeah. Do you have a CDL?
Nope.
Neither do I. We could both do. We could both drive microtransit, because you're just driving a regular car.
It reduces the what am I thinking of? Just the front cost.
Exactly.
You as an individual have to put in,
and it reduces the burden. I mean, like, you rock up to OmniRide today. You can come to us with no CDL. We'll train you to get one, right?
Right.
The problem is we'll train you to get one, and then you'd almost certainly leave. And what happens is you'd leave, and you'd either go to potentially a transit system that pays more if you could find one, Metro probably, or you might go haul rocks. Yeah. Right? Because rocks don't talk back. And you don't have to collect fares from rocks and this.
Full logistics.
Right? Or you don't need to stay as a bus operator. And so we have our operators of our microtransit, who are wonderful Keolis America operators who operate our regular bus service, but they are not trained. They don't have to be trained to the same level, so it makes it easier for those drivers to be recruited, right? And that is an extremely valuable tool for a transit agency that has a hard time finding people, and it's also good for the general public because they have another more dynamic way to interact with their transit provider and to get service. Maybe if they're in an area which doesn't have good fixed route, or it's looking to loop them into fixed route and to improve that connectivity, more of that first mile, last mile.
I was about to say, it reduces the effort on their part to have to get to that across that first mile to get to the hub in the first place, when it can just come
100%,
right?
Up, right? I mean, it's going to come to a point of aggregation, which is almost certainly going to not be your front door, but it's going to be on a corner close by. And people now are used to interacting with services like Uber and Lyft, and you can see when it's going to be there. It's just a very non-threatening service, and especially as we all get older, and then the young folks come along, they think that everything should be like that. They don't understand why the regular bus isn't like that, right? So it's all just an effort on the part of transit agencies to try and, make their services more appealing to folks as they come up and to improve what they offer.
Right. Has that made it easier from the planning side at all? Or?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. It's another tool in the toolkit, right? So we would use it in two ways. One, to help provide transit in an area that might have a failing local bus route, where the alternative is that there's just no transit there, and
that's what bail on all those
exactly
people, the little bit of people that weren't taking advantage.
And that was the case in the Manassas area. The other area would be, I wonder if this area could support transit.
It's a pilot.
Exactly. This
yeah.
isn't like a very great term, but I like to consider it as like it's a gateway drug to fixed route transit, right? Yeah. Because if you can prove that you can stand up a microtransit zone and you can have X amount of people use it, okay, well then maybe we'd look at transitioning you to a fixed route. Because the very important thing to remember with microtransit is everyone's like, oh, it's so much more efficient, it's cheaper. Yeah, to a point. Right? If you can get 50 people on a bus, there's nothing that microtransit can do about that, because you have to have 10, 15 vehicles out there to move the same amount of people.
Right, like you've seen the little diagram, everyone's seen the diagrams of the bus.
Exactly.
Yeah, eventually there's a point, like you're saying.
There comes a tipping point where it's better to have fixed route transit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of going on that too, I guess, how do you balance the technical and human sides of transportation planning? Like, I guess the sociology kind of point of it versus the technical.
We always try. We maybe in the past have had the accusation leveled at us that we were an organization that told people what they wanted to do, right? And we've really, since the tenure of our, I keep saying new executive director, but he's not new because he's been here for like 8 years at this point. But we tried to really pivot to an organization that listens to what people want, right? We have 3 mobility councils that meet semi-annually where we solicit feedback from the general public. We have a Hispanic council, we have an employer council, and we also have the Vanpel council, right? And we meet and we run service ideas past them. We ask them, like what new housing developments are going in, what proffers are there coming along, what types of things can we do to make our service more accessible. Perfect example, all of us, and this is something that came out of those groups, we didn't have all of our schedules available in Spanish, right?
Right, okay.
We had some of them, but not all of them, right? So we've made all of our stuff available in Spanish. We've made sure that certain languages are covered on our language line when you call into our customer service department. So if you happen to speak Spanish or Vietnamese, those being the 2 most spoken languages other than English in Prince William County, it's Spanish and Vietnamese. We make sure that we have folks that speak those languages. We make sure that on the TDM and outreach teams, we have native Spanish speakers so that we can meet people where they are, right? And so that listening rather than telling people, I think, has been a big part of getting that community involvement. Next week, we just did a transit and treats event where we're all out there handing out candy, just simply being in the community. We're in the community a lot. Just next week, we'll be doing a ridership appreciation events at all of our commuter lots, out there thanking our riders for sticking with us through this shutdown, which is hopefully ending this week, and all of that stuff. So it's really just a question of being out there, and I think it's very easy from a bus planning perspective to be kind of ivory tower-like about it, where you're like, okay, these are the numbers, these are the ridership, this is what we need to do. Have you actually consulted anyone about that? No, but we know best, right? And so what we've tried to do is to temper that we know best attitude with we have a thought on this, but we want to check that, right? So whether that's doing surveys of our ridership, whether that is any of the mobility councils, whether that is soliciting feedback through our social media or anything like that, we really try to engage more with the community than we have done at any point in time. And that is 2 things. Wonderful and really hard, right? Not because it's actually complicated like rocket science, but because it sucks a lot of time, right? A lot of time, and so you really have to be committed to doing it and have an organizational structure that states, okay, we're fine with 30 people going out and doing this, and that might be 75% of the people that work for us going and doing that. That's a lot of time to do that, but that's what it takes, right?
If your actual goal is to help a lot, like certain people and stuff too, because, and I noticed this too when I was doing my graduate work, was I was specifically focused on like the Hispanic population in Winchester and like first generation immigrants, and it seems obvious now, but at the time I was like, there's some people who don't either have access to computers or know how to use the technology or even understand, like we use a lot of acronyms and stuff, all the time, and they don't understand what a technical advisory committee is or this and how to get involved. So it's like you need to like physically go to the places they're going to be at, like understand who those community gatekeepers are to like get that information to the public, and even like print material, you can't just go full digital.
No, and 100% that. I mean, and we work with places like ACTS and we work with places like CASA to be, in the community, and our mobility services team, Sarah and Gabby, and then our marketing department team with Ivana and Kim, they spend huge amounts of time, like literally just doing outreach. I rarely ever see them, right? But they're out there doing that critical stuff, and those are places where we've maybe not invested before, right? Because those jobs they're more difficult to justify, right? Because it's like, so what are the quantifiable results of this happening? It's like, well,
there's the anthropological,
right?
Like,
you have to invest a lot of time before you start seeing results in these things. I mean, there's a lot of generational skepticism from a lot of these demographic groups. So that didn't happen overnight, so it doesn't get fixed overnight.
Exactly.
So you just have to have a commitment to work on it, and that's what we do.
Right. So I don't want to. I know you said you had a book Manassas has.
Well, we're good, man. We're doing good.
Because I know we started a little late, but I guess just a couple more things. I guess what's one piece of feedback you've gotten from riders or residents like even attending these events that you know has influenced like your decision making or?
So
you kind of mentioned like the Spanish.
That's a great example. The schedules is a great example of feedback that we took where you really are like, yeah, this just needs to be different, right? And then also, so you know, all of our local services are free. Right? Our commuter service is very much not free, but our local service, which includes microtransit, is free, right? But we routinely hear from people that we don't do a great job of talking about it, right? That we don't do a great job of promoting our services, about how free they are. And that's funny because myself, and I'm sure members of my team, are just like, we do nothing but talk about this, right? We work with chambers of commerce, we work with civic associations, we work with everyone to talk about this, but unless you physically are there in front of everyone...
Those days the information just not going the last...
Exactly. It's not going the last bit, or it's just not sinking in or something like that. Yeah. And so I think that we in the past have had an attitude of like, okay, well, I've checked that box, I've met with this civic agency, I've met with this, that, and the other, right? And at some point you're like, and we're done, right? But there's not that. It's a continuum, right? That association is going to have new people that come in. They don't know anything about you, right? Because the old people just left. So you constantly have to evergreen this process, and I think that's like another major thing that we've learned from our feedback from these councils. Where you might talk to someone at Todos grocery stores. They're a great community partner of ours, big Latino grocery stores in Prince William County, and you know the people you actually deal with, they may rotate through quite a bit. And so you may have overall an organizational relationship with them, but if you're not constantly hitting that point, the people that you actually deal with who are in the store talking to people on a daily basis, they change all the time.
Again, going back to the liberal, I guess liberal arts part of it, it's like it takes a lot of repetition for people to make a change in their behavior and stuff too. And same thing with like reiterating that information to
exactly.
Like, hey, it's free.
Exactly.
Like,
all of that. I mean, unfortunately, we are able to work with funding partners at the county and at the state through DRPT that allow us to have positions where we can do that, where we can basically have people just kind of in the nicest possible way, banging people over the head every single day about the message and about where our services go and the cost for them, that being that there isn't one, and that we can just continue to have people in the community doing that. Right. That's the biggest thing that we heard from people, and it's the biggest change that we've made in our operations since we came into existence in like 95.
Yeah, we've seen that too, I guess, with the employer outreach perspective. It's like you're getting that information out there and they might not be interested in it right then and there, but like if you keep that information out there and you're kind of pinging it with marketing, it's like eventually they're like, there might come a time where like, oh wait, actually we could use this now. Right. Oh, that's right, there's this program we could take advantage of.
Right, and to that point, just one thing I do want to mention is that we have this, every year we have a thing called the One Perfect Route, right? Where this is, it's led by our executive director on down, and we go through each one of our local routes and try and make everything as good as possible, make the timings correct, make all the bus shelters lovely, make sure that all the signage is up appropriately, make sure that it's running as on time and as tight and buttoned down as possible. And we just did one for the Route 91, which is our Dale City local, and some of the feedback we got from people was that our schedules, if anyone's watching this has seen our schedules, they are legendary for being extremely comprehensive, but that leads to them being extremely long form. So you open it and it's just going to keep going and keep going. And that's because it has all of the information in the world in it, right? Which is really, really relevant and great, but also very intimidating, right? And so we paired all of that information back to a rack card. Right? We dramatically took off all the information other than times, and when it came to routes, like if this route went to Potomac Mills, it had a Potomac Mills sign on it. If it stopped at Harris Teeter, it had a Harris Teeter logo. Right. So people see it and they're like, oh,
easy visual.
It goes to, exactly.
Right. You don't have to like sit there and process it.
Whereas if you say to someone it goes to the junction of Derby Dale and Dale Boulevard, everyone's like,
let me type that in.
Right? So some people that works for.
Some people know.
So we keep the old product, but we have the new product. So it's just making stuff more accessible, and even from an environmental perspective, you're printing out one rack card versus an 8-fold brochure, and you're doing that for every single route. So we really heard from people that they appreciated a less, verbose way to interact with our service, and we're trying to do that. So
That's cool. That's a good idea, though.
yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
Well, I guess I'll end too with one last thing. I guess what's been kind of motivating you to kind of be innovative in this sector? Like, how do you see it in the future, like developing?
So I'd say what motivates me is the constant desire to make a difference, right? And that's like the touchstone for my entire career, I guess, to this point. But I think in the future, what we will see is that we will see an increase in more, demand responsive travel. I think that both from a budgetary perspective and from an ability to get cheeks in seats with operators actually operating the vehicles continuing to be a challenge. I don't think that folks will have a choice but to flex away from doing fixed route, at least when it comes to starting new service, right?
Gotcha.
I think you'll see a lot more of that. Hopefully, you'll continue to see more of the real-time aggregation, because the main thing that anyone calls their bus company for is, where's my bus? Where's my bus?
Where's the bus?
Exactly. And so whether that be through Google Transit, whether that be through the Transit app, which is what we personally use and a lot of other agencies use, that live bus tracking, so that you can see on your phone, or if you're in Arlington or somewhere and you have it actually at the bus stop, right? And you know, I'm going to stand here for 6 minutes and my bus is going to be here. Not, I'm going to stand here and at some point a bus will be here,
maybe.
right?
Yeah.
Like that type of technological aspect towards transit has very much started, but it's not. Bus transit is very rarely at the bleeding edge of things, right? So it takes a long time for those things to filter down. And I think over the next 10 years, you will see much more of the demand response, much more of the live bus availability and tracking. And you'll probably also see, in fact, I was reading an article about it on WTOP the other day, open payment. Right? Open payment, where you're tapping your phone or your card, which, just like you would do at the grocery store, and things like Smart Trip card, they just cease to exist. Right? Because you just don't need them. Do you have a debit card or a phone with Apple Pay or Google Pay on it? Yes, you do, because you're someone with a heartbeat in the 21st century in America, right? Then yes, you will have that. So you don't need to have your Smart Trip card. I mean, heck, right now, my Smart Trip card is on my phone anyway.
I was about to say it's digital.
Right.
Now your account's linked to it, so it's.
And from our perspective, that's potentially a game changer, because fare boxes on buses are unconscionably expensive. When you're talking tens of thousands of dollars per bus and you have hundreds of buses, right? It gets to be extreme. But if you could simply replace that with a simple target, you don't have to have all the cash collection infrastructure like money rooms and Brinks trucks and all of that. And that really is the gold standard. And I mean, and as some people don't love it necessarily, but we are moving rapidly towards a cashless economy, right? And the big question that poses then is, how do you deal with the unbanked? Right? So the people who can't or don't have a bank account, they don't have a debit card, they don't have a smartphone, all of those things. So what you're seeing now is that a lot of those fare companies are producing like prepaid fare media that they can give cash and they get it. And so they're still tapping on the bus. So there's always a way to get round it. But we have to, not just for Title VI implications, but we have to, for just good stewardship and being good people, make sure that you're not alienating any of your ridership by doing this, right? Exactly. So I think those three changes, all of which are technology based, right, I think will really change our industry over the next 10 years.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll have you on again.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd come back in 10 years. Maybe. You heard it here first.
Hopefully sooner than that.
All right.
Well, thank you, Joe, so much for coming on. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in again for another episode of Transportation Talks. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.